Alright, so this week what we're going to do is a Pacman Frog setup. We actually sell these on our website. This is the frog habitat, pretty much, the Pacman Frog habitat. ZoomEd makes this. It's pretty fantastic, and it makes it really easy for you to set up your new frog. There are two kinds of Pacman frogs that are pretty common in the hobby. The first one is going to be Cranwelli, or the green Pacman, which is like this little guy in here. Make sure he doesn't jump out. That's a green Pacman. And then there's also the ornate or ornata Pacman frog. And then it's hard to see on this guy, but usually the ornates are actually going to have little horns above their eyes, and they're also going to have red coloration on them. I'll rinse these guys off a little bit later, and we'll show you again the differences between the two of them. And pause. Alright, so those were the frogs, and then the kit comes with a bunch of stuff. It comes with a couple of bowls for you to use. Now, these are two different sized bowls. The frog isn't really going to be eating any kind of pelleted food or anything unless you get, I'm pretty sure there's a company that makes like a Pacman Frog chow. We don't carry it. We don't really, I don't know exactly where you can get it. So it's kind of a moot point. But as far as the frog is concerned, you have at least one, if not two, water bowls. There's also some greenery for you to mix in there, as well as, and the nice thing about this ZoomEd kits is that it comes with this cleaner. It comes with everything you need pretty much to maintain the frog. It may not come with a ton of decor, but since everybody decorates their cage differently, that's actually a good thing for you because it comes with all the stuff you have to have, like the cleaner for your water bowl for the cage and stuff, and lets you pick out the kind of stuff you want to use to decorate the cage. It also comes with bedding. This is Eco Earth. It's a compressed coconut fiber. And it's really, really preferred for Pacman frogs and other kinds of burrowing species of frogs just because the particles in it are so small and fine that it's not going to be too big a deal if they do end up eating it, consuming it, things like that. You'll notice that we were keeping them on the coconut in the cups when we maintain them here. It's just a lot easier to clean. It's easy to maintain humidity for them. It's pretty much just going to be a more ideal substrate. Here in the store, we'll also keep them on orchid bark sometimes if we've got bigger ones in the glass tanks. And again, that's just a preference that we have here in the store just because, again, ease of cleaning. We're also cleaning them every week. We're checking on them multiple times a week. We check on them every morning at the very least. And then we're also taking them out and messing with the cage on a multiple time a week basis. So we're interacting with the frogs often, a lot more often than most people do at home. But for maintaining stuff at home, the coconut fiber is going to be the best. You can mix in a little bit of orchid bark just to make it look nice. And orchid bark is this stuff. So you can see that the particles are in there. It can help make the cage look a little nicer, and if you're keeping a large Pacman frog and you don't like it that they get covered in the coconut, adding some of this to the substrate can help make sure that your frog stays kind of nice looking, so you don't see him just covered in dirt all the time. That's just a personal preference of mine. A lot of keepers, especially online, really highly recommend not using any kind of larger particle substrate such as this moss because they're afraid the frog will eat it. Out in the wild, there's nobody out there preventing the frog from eating bits of pieces of bark, and if you have a larger frog, they really can just poop it right out, especially if you're keeping them warm enough. So it's something to weigh out to decide. Here at the store, I've really never seen one have a problem with the substrate. As long as you're keeping them right, they're not going to have a problem with it. So, this is going to be this is actually fake wood half log, which is going to be easy for you to clean and maintain. And then ZoomEd also comes with, a little bit of basic information for the starter keeper. We've got our Reptisafe for treating the water. Basically, frogs have such sensitive skin that you don't want to put them in just plain tap water if you don't have to. This stuff added to the water will help take out some of the chlorine, some of the chemicals, just kind of make the water a bit better for them, so that way you don't end up burning their skin or causing any problems. You don't need a whole lot of it, just a couple drops for the water, and they'll be set. So this is really nice. And again, ZoomEd hooks you up with this setup because they give you everything that you need to maintain the frog, and let you decide how you want to decorate it. And then here is your humidity and thermometer gauge. It's got these little arbitrary designations for desert, tropical, hot and cold, the little colors that are on the dials. You don't really have to go by that. I like to, when it comes to the Pacman frogs, where you put this gauge, I'll show you here in a bit, but you're going to want it to be between 60 and 80% pretty much most of the time, which is tropical, yes, but you don't have to kind of go by the desert or tropical terms. You're going to be more paying attention to the percentages on the gauge. So So now we take out this. Alright, so I've already made some of the Eco Earth. We keep a bunch of it here on hand at the store. So I'm just going to add it in. That brick that comes with the kit fills up quite a bit of the cage. So we can just go ahead and dump it all in. You want to, hold on. You want to go ahead and just add enough in there for your frog to burrow in. And then what we'll do next is we'll add some water. Alright, so now we're going to add some water. And I'm going to use these tweezers to stir it up just because it makes my hands really messy and gross, and I just don't need to. Add a bunch more water. So the nice thing about these Zoo Med kits too is that these cages are actually waterproof. So you can just add the water like this and it's not really that big a deal. The size jug that I'm using is a gallon-sized jug, and it's actually taking most of this jug to make the substrate wet enough. So that's just something to keep in mind, is that the substrate, well, when you make it at home, you're going to be soaking it in water anyway, so it'll probably be just fine. This stuff here is a little bit dry. So if you're using loose Eco Earth from the bag, you might want to be prepared to add a bunch of water to it. So we're just about ready here. So, yeah. Then when you stick your hands in there, you should be able to feel like it should clump like this. You're not going to want to squeeze too much water, be able to squeeze too much water out of it. But you do want it to be nice and moist. And then now the final touch that I'm going to do for the substrate here is I'm going to add the last little bit of water. I'm going to add the last little bit of water, and I'm just going to let it sink down to the bottom so that there's kind of a puddle. And then about once or twice a week, you're going to want to refresh that. Add a little bit more water to the bottom of the cage. And what will happen is that your frog will actually burrow down deeper into the substrate to seek out more humidity as needed. So we'll go ahead and do that. Let's give it a second. See how it looks. Add just a little bit more. And then you're going to want to let the top stay relatively dry. And there we go. So now we've got the substrate set. We'll go ahead and add our little half log here. And our bush. Put that there. Water bowls. We'll give this setup 2 of them, so he's got water on each side. And then what you can also do once in a while is you can try putting, like, when your frog gets bigger anyway, you can offer them pinkies, you can offer them mealworms. Unfortunately, these bowls are a little too short for you to put mealworms into. They will climb right out, so just be careful. And then we also need to put in our thermometer and humidity gauge. What you're going to want to do, and this is one of the bigger errors that I see people make when they set up their cages. You don't want to put this up here, because what purpose does that serve? You're going to want to put your thermometer and humidity gauge where the animal is, so you can see what the animal is living at. So you have a Pacman frog that burrows down into the substrate. Why would you need to know what the temperature and humidity is up at the very top of the cage? The frog's never there. What you're going to want to know is the humidity and temperature closer to the bottom. So what I always do is put it right near the bottom here, because that is where you actually want to know what the temperature is. And I usually put it on the side just because that way you're not kind of blocking up the back. It doesn't look as tacky to have it kind of just the profile here on the side. And then there you go. So that's pretty much at the substrate level. So you'll be able to see what your frog is living at. And then if you really want to get fancy, I'm a pretty big fan of using digital thermometers. This will help give you an idea of kind of the ambient temperature, the ambient humidity. This digital thermometer here will tell you exactly what temperature the substrate is, exactly what temperature it is wherever the probe is. And so you can stick it down to the substrate. You can put it in the hiding spot. You can put it over here. You can kind of move it around and see exactly where the frog is living at. Okay, so we've got this. And it actually comes with 2 suction cups, which I'm throwing everywhere. There's one here, which you can put, hang it right up here on the outside if you so desire. And then this will actually have come in here on the same side, but we're going to have the probe go down into the substrate because in this setup, I'm actually going to put a heat pad on the bottom of the cage on this side. And then the way that this heat pad works is it's going to go on the underside of the cage, underneath like that, and it's going to heat up this part of the cage for the frog. Just because here in Southern California right now, while I'm making this setup, it is winter, so most homes are about 68 to 75 degrees, which is a little bit too chilly for your average Pacman frog. This kind of heat pad is a nice gentle heat. It'll heat up the substrate, which is where the frog is anyway. And this will pretty much just heat it up to about 85, maybe 90 at the hottest. If you find that when you set it up and your heat pad is getting too hot, it is heating up to 90 to 95, you can put it on a thermostat or even on a rheostat and dim it down. Because your Pacman really only needs to be about 85 degrees at the hottest. This will pretty much heat them up and it'll be perfect. Your frogs, a lot of times frogs that aren't eating, especially Pacman frogs that aren't eating, either they don't feel secure, so they don't have enough substrate to burrow in, or they're not quite warm enough. Because a lot of keepers will try and keep them at room temperature, and if it's the summer and you're in the warmer part of the US, yeah, in the summer you really don't need to give them extra heat, but in the winter usually a little bit of extra something is needed. If you don't want to use a heat pad, you can also use like a 40-watt red bulb and put that into the heat lamp here. The only reason I don't normally recommend a heat bulb right away is because the heat bulbs do tend to dry out the air and the substrate, so you're going to be tinkering with the water and the humidity a whole lot more than you would if you just had the heat pad on there. And then the very last thing about the heat pad is that when you put it on there and it's on and it's warm, don't dump cold water directly on the part of the tank where the heat pad is. That will crack your glass. The abrupt change in temperature is really hard on the glass, and it can and will crack. I've seen people do it. So when you add water, just pour it in on the cold side of the cage, and it'll actually, because it'll be flat, it'll just kind of seep over to the other side. So there you have it. If you want to make the cage look a little nicer, you can get some of the Zoom Ed cork flats, you can use a cork round, you can use prettier looking fake plants, you can use caves, you can do the fake tortoiseshell hides. These are all items that are carried on our website, which is going to be www.LLLReptile.com. We have all that stuff there. As far as the frog is concerned, it doesn't really matter. You can do all kinds of stuff. As long as the frog can burrow down and hide in the substrate, as long as it feels safe and secure and you're not overcrowding the place, the frog is going to do just fine. Lastly, when it comes to caring for your frog, you are going to be feeding it, obviously. Now, Pacman frogs are called Pacmans because they're pretty much just a body with a gigantic mouth that's as wide as they are. They can and they will eat so much that they make themselves sick. I've seen them eat so much that they're just pretty much balls with legs. You don't want to do that to them. Feed them as much as they'll eat in about 5 minutes or so, and then that's pretty much it. You don't need to feed them every day. You can feed them every 2 or 3 days. Here at the store, we actually feed them only twice a week. We pretty much feed them just crickets of an appropriate size. Tiny little babies get mediums, but by the time you get them at home, most of the time they're big enough for large crickets. On average, babies will eat 4 to 5 crickets in a sitting, and then in about a month or so, they start eating closer to 10, maybe 15. Once they get to a size where 5 to 10 crickets isn't enough, you can also start offering them things like giant mealworms, soup worms, roaches, and even the occasional pinky. The only thing with rodents is that rodents can be extremely fatty, especially pinky mice, fuzzy mice, and hoppers, because they're all very young, unweaned mice, which are often much higher in fat content than an adult mouse. So all that means is just be aware of the fact that a mouse is a relatively fatty prey item for a frog. Imagine a wild Pacman. How often do they really eat mice in the wild? Just think about that for a second. This fat little frog on the bottom of the forest floor, how often do you think a little wild mouse is just going to wander around with a baby into its mouth? Not very often. So just keep that in mind. Maybe offer a mouse once a month, every few weeks. Just kind of keep it low key until they get to be a lot bigger. And the cool thing about this kit is it comes with this packet of Reptivite, and the nice thing about Reptivite is that it's calcium and multivitamins in one package. This little package here is the trial size, but this will still take you for quite a while because you only need a little pinch on their crickets. Honestly, because they're frogs and they don't need a ton of calcium, you can probably get away with dusting only every other feeding. But pretty much you do want to supplement their feeders with a little bit of something extra, just because a cricket is not the most nutritious prey item all by itself. It is pretty high in phosphorus, and if you don't dust the crickets with calcium, you can cause bone deformities and growth deformities and just metabolic issues with your frogs. So there you have it. That is pretty much how you set up the kit. We'll go ahead and rinse off our frogs here and show you what they look like when they're nice and clean. And then we'll set them up in here and see how they do. Alright, so in here you can see we've got the two Pacmans. This is the green one, this is the ornate. The green you can see just has the little green pattern. It looks pretty much it's a green Pacman. The ornate though, you can kind of see there's a little bit of the red here around the eyes, down here, here. It's just a little bit differently colored. So that's pretty much at this size, that's how you tell them apart. As they get older, again, the ornates will have little horns above the eyes, greens won't. Okay, so what I'm going to put in here is going to be the little green Pacman. And there we go. Happy little camper. As you can see, I actually moved the thermometer so that way it's sitting in this little crevice here. We'll go ahead and move that there, like that. And then the nice thing about these kits, again, is that they come with this little, a little notch in the lid, so that way you can have your digital probe go down and you actually don't end up with the lid being out. And there you have it. That is how you set up a basic Pacman setup. If you want to add stuff to it, you always can. To see a full care sheet on these guys, you can go ahead and visit our website at www.LLLReptile.com. And then for articles and more information about Pacmans, about reptiles and amphibians, about all the products we use, about just reptiles in general, husbandry care, all the latest and greatest and that kind of stuff, make sure that you sign up for the Reptile Times, which is our online magazine. We send it to your email on the first of every month. We have contests, prizes, plus tons of informative articles with pictures and everything. You can sign up for the free magazine on our the Reptile Times website, which is www.thereptiletimes.com. And then that's it. There you go. That is the Pacman setup. We'll see you next week. Have a nice day.